Hi everyone, I would like to tell you about a very fun project that we sort of accidentally almost ended up doing. Artemis 1, as you might know, is NASA resuming missions to the moon. Dwingeloo is a very small village in the Netherlands where a bunch of radio amateurs and amateur astronomers are running a 25-meter radio telescope. Where's the clicker? You took the clicker. Oh no, here. And NASA, I think just 3 weeks before the original launch date, did a request for expression of interest. They were looking for parties that were interested in being a ground station. And that actually meant they wanted us to do one-way Doppler measurements to help with the orbit calculations, because the thing had a very complicated orbit, retrograde around the moon and then back to Earth. There was a lot of paperwork involved. For instance, you had to explain how you could guarantee that you were not going to accidentally transmit on S-band, which was very easy for us, because at that time we didn't have a transmitter for that band. And also what kind of frequency accuracy you guarantee and stuff like that, which I'll address in a future slide. Anyway, they were looking for collaborators on this project. That was one too quick. And in the end, they selected 18 ground stations. And as you can see in the circle, one of them was a non-profit, CAMRAS, which is a C.A. Muller radio astronomy station in Dwingeloo, as a non-profit. And there's also a few people doing it with their personal equipment. There's some universities, there's some companies in there, but we were the only non-profit that was selected to help track this mission. I'm doing this talk on behalf of a lot of volunteers, and this is, I think, not even half of our volunteers, but just when we had a photo op. I think it does include most of the people, at least, that did help out with the Artemis mission. And you also see the telescope behind it, or at least the lower half of it. Above this, you have to imagine a 25-meter dish. Yeah, thank you. We had a pretty complicated software setup. There's something missing in the slide because we start with RF and then immediately, so there should be a B210 in there somewhere, but data comes out in Diffie format and we send it to all kinds of applications at the same time. First of all, we record it into SIGMF data, of course. We stream it into RTL TCP so that you can directly listen along on our websdr.camras.nl, where you can listen to all the various antennas that we have in the feed and around for meteor reflections. We were streaming it to, what's that again? To GQX, so that we could actually see it in ourselves while we were in the telescope. And then we ran it through a block FFT max. It simply takes an FFT over 1 second and tells you what frequency had the highest energy, and that is basically the data that we would return to NASA. Of your tracking tone, we found it at this moment in time at this frequency. However, most of the mission, it would not be sending this tracking tone, it was actually doing QPSK signal. But the nice thing is, if you have BPSK signal where the phase flips back and forth by 180 degrees, if you square that signal, you end up with removing all the modulation and you end up with the tone. And with the QPSK signal, you simply need to square it twice. So we did it to the 4th power, so you have a nice tracking tone. The other advantage is that in 1 second you suddenly get a 1/4 of a hertz resolution to return, which is even better. We also sent the short snippets to SIGMF, and we also had a coupling so that we could look at it live in GNU Radio and make even more processing if needed. Well, you can't have a slide about space stuff without mentioning Daniel Esteves, and just after we got started, he kindly informed us that, hey, I'm doing the same at the ATA, and with a single 6-meter dish, I'm getting a much better signal to noise than you do. So that was just a little bit of head scratching, and then we had to get in the elevator, as you can see in the image. That means going up, going to the feed, and then we had to swap the polarization, and then things went a lot better after that. And that is after at least checking that we had the correct polarization at least 3 times beforehand. So what do we actually see? What you see here is frequency actually the residual between the prediction from the JPL Horizons website for the Doppler shift to our location versus what we actually measured. And then most of the time it's a very constant tone, very slowly changing until there is something like an orbital burn, and then you see all kinds of squiggles. And what's even more interesting, when you've got the audio turned up, you can actually hear it. You can hear the frequency shift around as the rocket engines light. So this station was transmitting at S-band. We just received it on a B210. And in order to give meaningful data back to NASA, we had a hydrogen maser as the reference, not our own hydrogen maser. We actually were using the one from the Westerbork telescope, but using our White Rabbit link to our telescope so that we had a traceable frequency reference. And in my earlier talk, and you'll have to see it online unless you can go back in time, I actually explained a lot about that hydrogen maser and White Rabbit link. So this is another burn. I think this was the burn where it left lunar orbit and started its return to Earth. And you can see before the burn, the expectations match the graph very well, and after the burn as well. The burn itself sort of matches, and in between there's a little bit of squiggles where possibly the data are more or less calculated for the JPL ground station and not for us. But yeah, we could track these burns, and we sent all that data to NASA, and we haven't really heard much back, I have to admit. And this is how it looked like inside the telescope. We had an extra screen, and you just see in GQRS, and just at the bottom you can see an actual frequency jump. And at the same time, in a window there, we were just streaming the live webcam from the spacecraft, and you could occasionally see it turn around, and you could see the tone change, and then it would burn, for instance. One of the more interesting results we had is, and this is not in frequency, but is in amplitude. Just as the spacecraft disappears behind the moon, eventually you get a direct signal and reflected off the moon to you. And the two interfere, and that can tell you interesting things about the composition of the lunar surface, or maybe even for some, well, not for the moon, but for other planets, it would tell you about the atmosphere. So we had some very good quality data on those occultations. And I want to end with telling you that you also can be involved in this. All our data is open at data.cameras.nl. You can see all the data from our Artemis mission, but also pulsar data, hydrogen data, all the other cool stuff that we get up to. So if you want to give a try decoding the data, or just tracking it a year after launch, be our guest. The data is available for everyone. Thank you.